So the theme of this year's seminar is New Directions in Strategy, Technology, and Community. And to kick us off, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Letty Conrad, to talk about publishing innovations and milling the next big thing. In her more than 15 years of publishing experience, Letty has led user-centered web and mobile product development, delivering product design, research, and analysis that enables evidence-based digital product management. Dedicated to optimizing the researcher experience with digital scholarly resources, Letty has established her expertise in content discoverability and accessibility. She is currently a publishing and product development consultant, working with a portfolio of global clients. Letty serves as North American editor for Learned Publishing. She also is a scholarly kitchen chef and a part-time information science doctoral student in a remote program at Queensland University of Technology via San Jose State's iSchool. Please help me welcome Letty.
Thanks, Melanie. Hi, everybody. Good morning. That was a mouthful. I didn't realize my bio sounded so intimidating. Let's see. Do I need to do anything special to pull up my slides? I didn't talk to the AV guy. Sorry. Apologies. I should have asked this before. Sorry. Good morning. Genius. Thank you. So for those of you I haven't met yet, as Melanie said, I am a product R&D consultant. I'm based out of my home office in Southern California. As well as my own label, I do work with the Maverick consulting team out of the UK. And my focus is user-centered, hey Bert, user-centered, evidence-based product development with an eye toward optimizing both the researcher experience, but doing so in a way that meets business objectives and keeps the eye on the big picture. When my friends on the planning committee reached out and suggested this keynote, I first was panicked. I thought there was a mistake. You're joking. Very kind of you, but are you nuts? I'm just a lowly product R&D consultant. What could I possibly have to say? And gee, you want me to talk about the next big thing? Aren't we still working on the big thing from 6 months ago? And still working out metadata and workflows and linked open data, and aren't there lots of big things that we haven't achieved yet? And of course there are, but there's been quite a bit going on. This has been an exciting year to be in our industry. And so I do have a couple of things to share. So I'm going to start with that. I would propose to you today that we start by agreeing on 3 basic truths that I would suggest are perhaps self-evident at this point. The first is that scholarly publishing as a whole and research outputs specifically are being transformed by new technologies like data science, artificial intelligence, and not to mention cultural, political, economic, global changes around the world. When I think back to when I got started in publishing, PDFs were the killer app. It was the way to go. You could keep your formatting just like it looked in print. Researchers loved them. Libraries loved them. We could embed them with metadata. I thought we were done. That was it, right? But then indexing with Google became really important, and linking across databases to and from Web of Science and looking up authors' names on PubMed. These linkages became really important and required HTML, right? Really, nothing now when we look back, oh gosh, that's been forever ago, but that was a huge transformation. I remember painstakingly working to pull all that full text out of the PDFs. There's no question, I think, at this point that we have been touched by and transformed by technology in a number of ways. I also feel pretty confident that the next big thing will continue to challenge our roles, continue to challenge us to define who we are. What is it to be a publisher? What is it to be a librarian? Again, thinking back to those early days in publishing, I remember puzzling out how to create the first A to Z list with URLs, with titles that libraries could put in their systems and use for linking. And it seemed really hard and really foreign. And I remember a colleague of mine saying at the time, a little bit grumbling, I wasn't sure how much he was joking, but he said, this is what libraries used to do. Why are publishers doing this? This is a filtering mechanism. This is an indexing function. This isn't the domain of publishers. And I think it's true. Publishers have been feeling quite a bit of pressure to redefine what we do, to make sense of what we do, and to make sense of why an online journal demanded of us different things, different skills, different functions than the print journal did. But it's not publishers alone. It's librarians and everyone across the scholarly communications supply chain that has been questioning who are we and how do we do what we do. And libraries are publishing and publishers are indexing, and indexers are playing a key role in information discovery and retrieval experiences, which has long been the domain of libraries. So whatever comes next, it will certainly continue to challenge our roles. And the third promise is probably a bit of a throwaway, but I love things in threes, as you'll see. And that is, whatever comes next is going to change us. Keep your knees bent. Stay, willing to question yourself, question the process, because change will absolutely be part of our lives, no matter what our day job is. So building on that foundation, I don't want to try to paint for you a picture of something as ephemeral as the future of publishing and the future of content. Instead, I want to try to flip the picture and color outside the lines a little bit, rule out some things first, talk a bit about what hype can we dismiss, what is not the next big thing. So maybe we can start to clear some space and see an impression, a format, maybe even a method for how we might make sense of the innovative developments and the opportunities that are available to us in our industry. I hope by peeling away some of the hype, we'll be able to work together today, and there is a roundtable on this topic as well, so I hope you'll join me to talk about how we can together make this noise more signal and make more sense out of all the chaos of change. So as we enter into this exercise, I offer three more promises, a bit of solid ground as we sort of cast ourselves into the open waters of innovation in scholarly and professional publishing. I can assure you that the next big thing will not be entirely technological. I believe it is not all about data-driven solutions, as much as I love evidence and software. Algorithms, machine learning, these may change, these may transform the way we do our work, but the next big thing will not be entirely ones and zeros. The next big thing is not going to necessarily be another disruptive business model. It won't be another flavor of open access. The future does not rest entirely with one model, with nonprofit or for-profit. I think the next big thing needs to think more holistically about how we do business. And the next big thing will not be done in isolation. What comes next will not be entirely in our hands. The next big thing will likely be driven by market demands, by social influences, by reader preferences, whether authors or students, whether governments or library consortia, whether our boards, or our own value systems. In fact, I can promise you that the next big thing will be big not just for financial or technological reasons, but will be big because it matters to a community or a group of communities. Future changes will be born where agreements are reached across stakeholders as we work together to redefine how we do our work, where all players in the supply chain line up with some shared interests in conformance with information standards, investments in relationships, in collaboration to fund the mandates for change that are coming from governments and research institutions, from researchers and from publishers alike. So all that said, what is next or not next? Here are some themes that I have planned for us for the next few minutes. I'm going to talk a bit about open science and why it does not spell the end of the world. It does not spell the end of copyright or publishing as we know it. I want to talk about artificial intelligence and where artificial intelligence, like machine learning, is not necessarily a silver bullet. I want to talk a bit about blockchain. This is an area I'm still learning quite a bit about, so you'll watch me stumble a little bit. But I do want to talk about why blockchain does not need to keep us up at night and how we can maybe make sense of some of what we're learning in these early days. Of course, I want to talk about data-driven publishing, but I want to talk about why it alone is not going to change the landscape. I'm going to talk about the paywall, of course. We have to talk about the paywall, and I want to talk about why it is not going away. And finally, I want to touch on the big deal and whether or not it is doomed. So, open. The future is open. There's no question in my mind about this fact. The open train has left the station. The open science movement has reached a size and has gained a level of momentum that, well, there just isn't a way to reverse something this big that's going that fast. The fact is, researchers, as well as their funders, libraries, stakeholders of all kinds, are demanding that scientific communications and scholarly publishing be opened up in various ways. And that's not just about open access. It's about transparency. As I understand it, the open science movement is demanding a level of transparency throughout the scientific life cycle, from funding to publication and indexing to citations. There's a growing demand for licenses and technologies that enable information sharing across organizations and across actors to drive a number of different functions in the scientific enterprise. And of course, there's access. Open access may not be the whole enchilada, but it is critical. There's been a lot of focus, there's been a lot of momentum, a lot of pressure from researchers and institutions. This one has had a lot of focus, but I want to throw out the fact that I don't think that access in the open science movement is entirely about full text access. Open science frameworks, as I understand them, are expecting content as well as data and related research information to be findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. I'm thinking about things like the FAIR data principles. And that brings us to issues of security and licensing, issues of ownership and control. Open science advocates are looking for a degree of security in both business and technological transactions, where open policies aim to avoid being locked in by proprietary formats. And then there's innovation. Accelerating the speed to discovery specifically, accelerating scientific breakthroughs. This was a key focus in the Gates Foundation forum that was held a few months ago here in DC. The theme for the forum was defining success. The group, the organizers, were really trying to push the open science movement to think practically about how to assess whether they are achieving the sort of primary goals of the funder in this case, but the larger aspirations around shortening the runway to scientific breakthroughs. And there's been quite a bit of research in the sort of science of information lately around how the available discoveries are winnowing. So we have both pressure to shorten the runway and potentially a limited number of discoveries. Oops. Popped ahead a little too quickly there. Finally, some research also coming out of the Gates Foundation as well as other open science initiatives are noting the critical nature of what they're calling social dimensions, social factors of open science. Things like leveling the research and innovation playing field. They found in one study an increase of access to science effectively increased the fairness in research equity and research access. It injected a greater demographic diversity in particular scientific enterprises, but these in turn also built trust and engendered a sense of loyalty, both with readership as well as with the general public. These all add up to a holistic movement toward open science. Again, not a passing fad, not just about open access. Open science as a holistic movement is here to stay, and I believe it is ripe with opportunities for progress, for development, for innovation, as well as garnering new areas of economic value. This was another highlight in some studies that were featured at the Gates Foundation this summer. New metrics are coming forward around the financial rewards of open science, in particular looking at the financial value of open data and the investments, the rewards that are reaped by everyone involved when data is made open. The political and economic factors of funding open science, however, are among its biggest challenges. Last week's headlines panicking at the prospect of the impact of the new Plan S initiative could drastically limit submissions to something like 85% of existing journals. And this would undoubtedly be a reason to worry. It would also undoubtedly give rise to innovation, give rise to new models of open publishing, but also has the potential of discontinuing some existing models in open publishing. Hybrid journals, for instance, where OA publishing is available at the article level. This has offered a solution for a number of scholars and institutions, but it's also posed quite a bit of a challenge for libraries, for readers. It poses a challenge, hybrid journals do, for indexing, for discoverability. And Plan S would effectively ban hybrid journals as a dissemination channel for the scientists that they fund. Plan S is not the boogeyman, though, and I want to be sure in this seminar in the next day and a half that we keep all points of analysis in mind. I'm thinking of the Delta Think newsletter that came out recently. Their data demonstrating that the total number of Plan S funders comprises only a fraction of the world's total research output and applies at the moment to just specific countries. The Plan S principles, however, are consistent with other forces, like some high-profile library cancellations we've all been reading about lately, and the University of California's Pay It Forward initiative, among others. These are aligned, though, with broader concepts of open science, again, not just about OA, but about funder mandates. I think about the movement really essentially holding potential for all players in the supply chain to get inventive about how to respond to these global demands and to these new initiatives, to increase transparency, access, security, innovation, and equity in science. And the paywall, our favorite topic. We can't talk about OA without talking about the paywall, right? I assert that the paywall is not going away. It may change shape. It may take different forms. It's definitely got some holes. Folks have been trying to chip away at it. Some folks have declared its demise is imminent. And there are epic tensions at play at the paywall. It's quite a capitalistic, classic sort of capitalistic tug of war. The model has taken beatings over the last few decades. But the basic concept of controlling access and ownership for the kind of specialized intellectual property coming out of scientific institutions and those who publish their outputs seems to transcend the specific format, the specific shape and size of the paywall, whether it be subscription or otherwise. Basic protections for intellectual property are in danger only when we put technology above human, legal, cultural value sets. The shape and size of the paywall could look like an APC. It could be upstream or downstream of the publication event. It could be at the article level or otherwise. The latest academic market data is showing that the access paywall in whatever form is persistent, even if the goalposts are shifting, even if the big deal becomes a read and publish program. The data shows, in the academic sector anyway, the death of the paywall has possibly been as overhyped as the death of the print book, both of which I contend are not going anywhere. Funding flows from somewhere. No matter what we call it, no matter where in the workflow we're putting that price point, whether we're using walls to meter that access or not, challenges to making the paywall work financially and logistically have given rise to some really cool innovations in the last few years. I'm thinking of those access brokers we've been talking about, those plugins. Users are proving that they're willing to take the extra time to download an app that will help bridge them and library access to make their experience of discovering and downloading content that they're authorized to, make that a little bit easier. There's understandable concern about the likes of Sci-Hub and others, but there's another way to look at it too. These pirate platforms have been a real catalyst, actually, a point of inspiration in our industry to try new things, to reinvent access controls, to try these plugins, to imagine what could be beyond the IP authentication industry standard. And OA efforts are certainly eager to do away with traditional IP subscription models. As I said, there's been a lot of panic lately about Plan S and possible influences of these efforts. But again, I think it's important to look at the size and scale of these initiatives. Plan S in particular would impact about 3% of articles globally, even though the number of journals that they would be limiting their researchers to submit to may be lower. The actual amount of content produced by these funding agencies is relatively small at the moment. Now, others could join Plan S, and that's one to watch. But the takeaway for me is that panic is not in order. Instead, we need to stop and rationally think about how our organizations respond to the initiatives, and respond in particular to the olive branches and the efforts that folks behind plans like Plan S, folks behind those initiatives are looking to publishers to input, to engage with them on implementation and execution. And this is a role we have to play. This is a moment for us to step up and say, here's what publishing looks like. Here's the sausage factory. Here's what we need to make this work. And I think it's in part up to us whether Plan S melts away or becomes the first snowball in an avalanche that perhaps knocks more holes in the paywall. I think that's partly on us. So another thing, the next big thing is robot overlords. Another sizzling hot topic in our space is artificial intelligence, and specifically applications of machine learning to improve scientific research and dissemination. And for all the hype, I can promise you we've not achieved artificial intelligence. It's not a done deal. It's not the singularity, the algorithm that suddenly knows everything that's going to supplant the way we function. It's just simply not true. In reality, it's more that we've become really good at some signal processing, and we've become better at evolving what has been a long-standing domain in science. Artificial intelligence is not new. It's been in our society for a number of years. We just don't think it looks the way we expect it to, perhaps. AI is not a black box. I forgot my little marching robot. Sorry about that. Here they come. They're not going to take over. They're also not a black box. I hear concerns from clients that AI is not worth investing in, or it's a little tricky to invest in because I really don't know what's going on. I have no good way of assessing what's really going on in the system. And I understand that. I'm not a statistically minded soul either. But it's not that AI is a black box. It's more that it uses statistical logic, and that's unusual for some of us as far as a way of thinking. We often think in absolutes, I think, especially in scientific enterprises, right? It's known or it's unknown, it's true or it's false. So grokking AI results can take some training for us. We're both training machines, but we also need to be trained in how to best assess those machines. And I think there are things like threshold scores that we can develop to fit a particular use case that can help us understand what's going on in that box. But like any data system, garbage in, garbage out, right? Data must be prepared, nourished. It must be well structured, high quality. Otherwise, any computational process, whether artificially intelligent or otherwise, is going to reap poor or useless results. And machine learning is not just one thing. It's a loose collection of powerful tools with specific applications, but it's only when we apply our business intelligence and our publishing acumen to put those pieces together to solve a problem that we can really build something special. Making machines faster does not make them more intelligent. You'll only get the wrong answer more quickly. That's a quote from folks at Unsilo, who I've been learning quite a bit from recently about AI. And they've taught me that the benefit of having faster machines is to speed up the cycle of experimentation. So I think there are incredible opportunities here, but I want to stay grounded in reality. And on that point, I want to declare what little I know of blockchain. I really don't think that it's all that in a bag of chips. I think it has immense potential. I've been reading recently about what some libraries have been doing with blockchain. I've been reading about some of the outputs from the NFACE conference in May. There was a virtual San Jose State iSchool event this summer, and there are some great ideas coming out around blockchain. Libraries are starting to play with smart contracts, possibly looking at how to be a better storehouse for copyright clearance or other transactions that require a level of trust. There is clearly potential for accelerating how we handle some key governance functions like peer review, like licensing, as well as loads of use cases in K-12 education, undergraduate education, student records, funding, assessment, et cetera. Some blockchain copyright services are already in business. I'm thinking about those particularly around photos and images, and that seems like a really germane sort of use case for us to draw on potentially. Blockchain, as I understand it, can add a layer of trust in areas such as disseminating open data. I mentioned earlier the financial and scientific value of open data. Remote collaboration between researchers. I'm thinking about examples like DAT. DAT is a decentralized data storage and sharing system that is built with blockchain using open source technology so that users can both share their data but then also track how others are using their data. And as an information science student, I'm wanting to jump onto that kind of thing, although my department really, when I asked about what is our policy in open data, I got stares. The what? I don't know what you mean. But back to blockchain. I think it has potential to really gracefully join up a number of really critical functions in the scholarly communications life cycle and can really help pull together some strategic goals shared by organizations in the scholarly space. But as I said, I'm still learning, and there's still a lot more to learn across the industry. There are a number of environmental costs that some analysts have flagged up. Right now, there's a lack of regulation, so that can lead to some risks. I've heard developers talk about how it's a slow cycle with blockchain. There can be some legal issues that can slow up that cycle. So, you know, blockchain may sort of naturally support some key issues in our industry, but there's more to learn. It's like AI, it's not a single entity. It's not one sort of branded piece of technology. Instead, it's an amalgamation of software tools that have come together, and that requires our vision. That requires us to bring the problems to the tech and really test whether there is user-centric sort of business vision that can join up that technology with the tasks that we have at hand. And before we can declare that blockchain is the next big thing, much more needs to be known and explored. This picture cracks me up in part. I picked it because it reminds me of 15 years or so in a boardroom when a particularly enthusiastic executive had come back from a seminar much like this one, just frothing at the mouth about XML. We have to have XML. We have to have it. I'll have to have it full text, all XML, have to have it now. And I was sitting on the tech side of this particular board table, and one of my colleagues, being a bit cheeky, it wasn't popular at the time, but it did make a point, wrote XML in big letters on a Post-it and slid it across the table to the executive. Again, wasn't very popular at the moment, but the point being, the technology on its own is this generic tool available to us. We humans have developed to help solve problems. We can't come to the tech and say, what can you do for me? We have to bring our problems at hand. We have to bring our view of how researchers are working and what it is that we need to do to make their lives easier and to further the scientific enterprise. So artificial intelligence, blockchain, all of these require data, but data on its own is not enough. And I'm referring to the capital D data here. That is embodied in the content that we publish. That is inherent in the metadata surrounding that publication, the data about the data, but then also is inherent in the transactions of our businesses and the business data related to publishing. So I think that in order to make the most of any of these assets, our data and the tech that processes that data must be part of a bigger picture, must be joined up with an operational understanding of how our users engage with our content, joined up with a vision for how we might make a difference in the lives of those researchers, and a viable business plan to bring that vision to market. Data is not just for STM publishers. This is something I can't believe I'm still hearing from clients, but it is true. I hear humanities and social science publishers say, we only have a data strategy for sales and financial because our content is all text. Well, I understand that, and humanities and social sciences has a proud history of narrative and text-based research. However, digital humanities is changing that. Things like big data in social fields like psychology is changing that. I presented last month to a group of open science advocates, and they wanted to know where is the opening for us technologically, and they wanted only to talk about the medical and hard science fields, and it was a bit frustrating because there is quite a bit of data out there on the humanities and social sciences side. So I encourage all academic publishers to play a mean game with data because it's all germane for us. That data strategy is not just a technological puzzle to be solved. Instead, it does require stakeholders all around the table in our organizations as well as across the supply chain to unify around our priorities, to think creatively about where data assets can actually help us solve problems, both business problems and research problems. A good data strategy also means being a participant in relevant metadata and information standards. When we each do our part, we can achieve things like the DOI, EPUB, ORCIDs. These things are pretty tremendous if you think about what we're able to do with them now that we sort of take for granted. APIs, just no big deal. But there are standards behind those things that make it possible and lift all boats with things like interoperability and transferability. A data strategy must also consider privacy and security issues. In essence, data must be invested in from our own individual and collective benefit to ensure the quality and structure meets today's expectations. That means a financial investment, sure, but also the social dimensions. Don't forget about that. Skill development, the resourcing, and the ongoing strategic caretaking as well. The future of the big deal. Okay, I have to admit, this is not my area of expertise, but I have been fascinated this year by the news around library cancellations and changes in acquisitions patterns, especially for journals and especially in support of open access. The forces pushing for open science are something to be reckoned with, for sure, as I said a moment ago. This is the new normal, and we must adapt. The traditional big deal is clearly on decline, although I'm sure it still fits some libraries, so I wouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Instead, read and publish may become the next big deal, and publishers of all kinds need to be preparing themselves to address those questions with library customers. I think the big deal actually offers publishers an opportunity to change some marketing messages as well. I think APCs could be billed as a quality control measure, essentially the cost of vetting the quality of the submissions. But I think that message gets lost. Again, with my PhD hat on, you would be shocked the perceptions of publishers from some scholars who really don't understand the economic engine that drives publishing and instead sees us all as fat cats. The challenge to reshape that message, to reshape the message of how we do what we do is one aspect, but APCs are not the only alternative model. Last week on the Scholarly Kitchen, I think it was Tim Vines pointed out that submission fees perhaps would be a useful implementation, that if we put submission fees on mega journals, high volume journals, that may lower APCs overall. And I think that's a model worth giving a try. There's also been a good bit of activity on the B2C side. This is a project I've been involved in this year with an enterprise client who is taking a sort of platform approach and building out a consumer model to sort of extend new revenue streams using the same existing platform. The iTunes article rental model. I mean, how many of us sort of laughed at that 10, 15 years ago? We thought, God, there's no way that's going to fly. Well, actually, it's been a really strong drumbeat of revenue for a number of publishers, some of you sitting here, enjoying those regular monthly royalty checks from the significant market base I did not expect was there that does rely on the read-only access to scholarly material. And TDM is another one. There's loads out there, I think, in new opportunities for building revenue out of text and data mining. It's just one more area that I think is ripe for experimentation. The big deal in general is ripe for redefinition. Okay, so when I first set out on this keynote adventure, I promised I wasn't going to make any predictions. I thought, not a crystal ball person, I'm not a futuristic person, but I just couldn't help myself. So here goes. I believe in the power of balance. And I believe that we will be challenged, as we have been the last few years, we will continue to be challenged to strike a sustainable balance between the trade-offs in innovations in our industry. I believe the future will be more automated, more computer integrated, extending how humans and machines work together to solve problems. Semantic intelligence, for instance, will continue to be of high importance to our industry, both for computational extensions of research tasks as well as data gathering and content discovery and reader engagement as well. But future innovations will succeed where they establish and maintain quality publishing outcomes. Computational algorithms cannot be left entirely to logic and to science. There are social dimensions of building trust, building loyalty, that go beyond the mechanics of semantic search. It may be boring, but it's true, and I think one of the biggest threats right now in our industry is eating away at reliable, ethical, trustworthy publishing. As I said, I believe the future will be more open data, open access, transparency, but the push for privacy will also continue and will continue to challenge the limits of personalization in digital reading and research experiences. The future will struggle to balance human gifts with computational benefits. Teamwork between people and machines can lead to a lurch in progress in key areas of scholarly publishing, but these technological opportunities will need to be balanced with the human side. You can tell I'm a social scientist, right? Specifically, the future of publishing is certain to be more colorful and more diverse, more regionally diverse, more racially diverse, more intellectually diverse. And the future will be informed by an ever-changing body of information practices in our readers. The reading habits of scientists continue to evolve as they have over the last several years. Digital reading influences the social norms, the rudimentary neurological functions. I'm thinking of Marianne Wolf. If you haven't read her, pick her up. But ultimately, I think in balance, this is a story of what future innovations mean in our field on a social aspect. Future innovations will be informed by how well we work together, by how well we work toward or not shared goals to develop partnerships, to develop compromises, to develop and maintain communities will be key, I think, in achieving these balances. And finally, I want to leave you with an assignment, a call to action, because we're all in this together, right? Let's face it, keeping up with the innovations that are out there could be a full-time job in itself. I know I've lost an afternoon to the news headlines. I'd wager, though, the best way to filter those headlines is not in your job titles. I would wager that actually, that might help you with a quick browse of the headlines. I have 5 minutes at lunch. I just want to see what's going on in my space, so when I go into my afternoon meetings, I won't be completely behind. But I also encourage you to take a moment and read stuff on the other side of the ledger. I remember for a long time being in technology and thinking, I don't need to think about sales. I just don't need to read that information. It's not about me. I don't need to worry about marketing. And it's just not true. The whole environment affects each other, and I think the changes at hand really are impacting all of us in different ways. So I would suggest that we take the time to follow some buzz on Twitter, to read some posts, to watch the odd webinar, to get educated. For me, it's blockchain, for instance, to get educated on those new opportunities and new technologies that are out there that may help you solve problems that are sitting on your desk right now. I know it's not possible every day to sort of take this very serendipitous approach to the news about our industry and about innovations, but this keynote asked me how to advise my peers on how to best filter all of this noise and chaos into a strategy or into an approach to understanding the changes in our industry. And I would suggest that within our roles, within our various organizations, whether an employer or a consortia, that we sit with like-minded peers and say, gee, did you see this? Let's talk about it. How do you think it impacts our organization? Where do we want to stand in 5 years on this issue? What do we want to be known for at the end of the day? What is our North Star? These are questions I think we all can bring to our organizations, and to stay informed, obviously, by doing so, the long-term vision that we can bring will really enrich our conversations, and I hope will enrich conversations at this seminar today as we together puzzle out what the next big thing is. So that's it. Thank you. Some questions? Challenges? Questions? Predictions? Anybody got a prediction I missed?
Questions? Here we have one.
Can I stay seated? Or? Hi, I'm Andrew Harmon from Endocrine Society. I just wanted to ask, some publishers, and we're one of them, have taken the matter of big data and kind of punted it back to the researcher and said things like, it's not our responsibility exactly where you put the data as long as you reference it properly in what you submit to us.
Yeah.
I just want to know what your response to that is, if you've seen that as a viable approach, or if there's anything else you think publishers should do in that regard.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally a viable approach. I would add to that, though, you might want to build some structure around that statement, right? So it's not on us. You're the experts. Tell us what you want to do with your data. But then let's maybe do a hackathon, or let's do a contest, or let's do a focus group at bare minimum, right? Tell me, what problems are you trying to solve? What data do you wish you had? What systems do you wish you had to manage the data you do have? So really getting them to speak with you collaboratively about where they would use that data, and to actually, as much as you can, kind of put their viewpoint on while you're thinking about what data you do have and how you manipulate it to make it available. That's really where it sounds so trite these days, user-centered sort of product development, but the point is the business is always there, right? The business is the one funding the product, the business is the one funding the publications. So we have to keep the user at the center by reminding ourselves it is on them, but they can't go it alone. We need to hear what they need and what it is they're going to do with the data. Does that help? Yeah? Other ideas? Anybody else want to?
I'm jumping in here. It's Craig Van Dyke from the Clocks Archive. I just wanted to pick up on that. Leaving it entirely to the authors is a way to ensure that chaos continues. So finding best practices, I think, is a good thing. DataCite is pretty well known, and I'm sure there are others. But I would think that a publisher should come to the authors with maybe 2 or 3 options that the publisher sort of endorses, like DataCite, for example. Some people just say GitHub. I'm not sure that's the best solution. As a preservation archive, we're looking for normalization, standardization, and I think for publishers, the more normalized the processes are, the more efficient. So trying to find some normalization of the way publishers and authors work with data.
That's a great point.
Hey, Letty. This is Hannah Heckner from Science Magazine. I know that you said that you didn't want to use a crystal ball, but I thought I would ask a pointed question. I know we're talking about collaboration, I think, later on today, but what do you see as your thoughts for the most important collaboration in moving forward? Is it within publishers and technological platforms, funders, authors? What do you think is the most important and effective way to move forward?
Gosh, that is a big question. I guess it would really depend on the kind of sector specifically, right? Because I think there are probably different challenges and opportunities in different disciplines, potentially also different regions. I feel like over the last 10 years or so, the library-publisher collaboration has really solidified and I feel like the channels of communication are really open. I don't feel like that's there with the funders, or maybe it's just really new and it just hasn't been as well established. But like I said, that Plan S paragraph, I forget exactly how they phrased it, but it's something like, we realize that this is a big change and we're asking for the moon, so publishers come talk to us. I think that's a real, they're saying, here's what we want the moon, I want the pony, I want what I want. What can we do to make this work together? I would say the funders are probably a really big one at the moment. Anybody else want to challenge that? Do we know if there's anybody online who has questions? There were not. Okay.
Great. Thank you so much, Letty. Let's give her a big round of applause.